So we have the backend set up to make requests using GraphQL, and now we need to do that implementation on our front end. And what I'm going to do is just add a new menu item here called GraphQL, and we'll play with that to see what kinds of things we can accomplish using GraphQL. So let's get started. So I'll go back to my IDE, and I'm looking at the front end source code. And what I'm going to do first of all is create a component just to hold our code as we experiment with GraphQL. So I'll create a new component, a new file, which I'll call GraphQL.js. And I'll do my import, imrc, and I will export a default class called GraphQL, which extends component. And we have to have a constructor, which takes props, and we'll call superprops. And I'll set up some state. This.state equals, and we're going to need a variable to hold our movies, so I'll put one in here called movies, and it will start as an empty array. We'll also put isLoaded in, which will default to false, and error, which will default to null. And I'm probably going to use an alert, so I'll put an alert in as well. Type initially hidden, so dnone, the bootstrap class, and the message will be an empty string. Okay, so there's our constructor. Now the very first thing I'm going to do here is create the component.didMount method, and we'll use that to construct and send a GraphQL request off to the back end. So component.didMount, and the first thing I'll do is construct my query, and I'll call that payload because that's what we're sending to the back end. And I'm going to use the JavaScript template syntax, so backticks. So let's create our first GraphQL query. And what we're going to call is the command list, because we want to get all of the movies. So we do it like that, list, and then in curly brackets, and the whole thing is wrapped in curly brackets. And what do I want to get from the back end? Well, I want the ID, and there are no commas here, and the title, and say the runtime, and say the year. And that's enough for now. So that's where I'm constructing my request. And this is what I'm going to send to the back end. So let's create now our fetch request. So first thing we'll do is create some headers. Const myHeaders, just like we did before, is equal to a new headers. And we'll append a header to it, myHeaders.append. And we're just going to tell the backend what kind of content you're getting. Content-type, and it is application/JSON. Now we'll create our request options. Const request options, and that's equal to an object. And it has the method, and on our backend we're expecting a post request, so we'll send a post. The body will be our payload, and the headers will be equal to myHeaders. Now let's do the actual fetch request. So just like we did before, fetch, and we're going to fetch from http://localhost port 4000 /v1/GraphQL/list. And we pass along our request options. And then we have our first then clause. Then we're going to take the response, whatever we get back, and we'll convert it to JSON. Response.json. Then, and here's where we actually take what we're getting and populate a variable. I'm going to call the variable the list because it's a movie, a list of movies. So I'm getting data back, that's what I'm calling it, and I'm going to use an arrow function and create a new variable, let the list equal, and we're going to take what we get back and grab what we need from it and populate the list. And we do that the same way we did before. Object dot values, and we're going to get data dot data, and you'll see why when we get the response in a moment, dot list. And now we return that. Return the list. So it's available in our next dot then. Dot then. And now we're going to get the list and use an arrow function. And all I'll do right now is just say console.log the list. Okay, and let's go now create our render function, because this won't compile without one. Render. And we'll just return, and for now we'll just return h2 GraphQL. Okay, so hopefully everything compiled. Let's find out. It did. Perfect. So now we need to create our menu item and actually display this component. So let's go back to app.js and let's find where we're going to put this link. I'll put it right here, just before the closing UL tag. So what I'm going to put in here is li, and it has a class name, which is equal to list-group-item. And inside of that, we'll route to something that, or link to something that doesn't exist yet. And we'll create that in a moment. Link to equals, and we'll just put /GraphQL. And then down here, say right here, it doesn't matter where it goes, but I'll put it right here. We'll say root exact path equals /GraphQL. And it will link to our GraphQL, which I have to import. And hopefully it did the import for me. Let's make sure. There it is. So now we should be able to go back to our web browser. Everything is working, it seems. I'll open the JavaScript console. And I guess I left something out of there. Oh yes, the text for the actual link. GraphQL. That's better. And there's my link. So let's watch the console when I click on this. And there it is. We got an array back. And inside of that array, we have all of our movies. So let's go display those. So I'll go back to my IDE and find GraphQL.js. And let's improve this render function. So I'll wrap everything I'm returning in a fragment. And that should do the import for me. And drag this down here. And inside of here, I will put, say, an HR. And then I'll just deal with what's in my state the same way that I did before. So before the return statement, let's say let movies equal to this.state. So I have a local variable called movies I can work with. And after the HR, I'm just going to say div class name equals list-group, like we did in the other page where we're, or component where we're displaying movies. And inside of that, I'll say movies.map, and I'm going to map over M. That will be my iteration. And inside of this, I will put an A link. A, and I'll just say key equals m.id, so I have the key, so I won't get any warnings. And the class name is going to be equal to list-group-item, list-group-item-action, and I'll give it an href. And I'm not going to link to anything. You can link it to whatever you want to, so I'll just put #. And then inside the A tag, I will put the title, say strong, and then m.title. And that should be enough for right now, just to make sure it works. So let's go back and have a look at our web browser. And go to GraphQL. I'll reload the whole thing. And go to GraphQL. And nothing is showing up. So what did I get wrong? Oh yes, of course. Up here, we console log the list, but we actually need to populate the state variable. So I'll just say this.setState. And I'm going to populate movies to be equal to the list. Okay, let's try that now. That looks better. So now I have all of these items, and that's exactly what I want. Now I can do more than that, actually. You'll notice what we're getting back here is only the information that we requested. So for the first index in the array, for example, I'm getting the ID, the runtime, and the title. But what if I want the description? Well, I can come back here and modify my query and say, include the description. Now when I come back here and look at this, in my console, I have the description as well. So that means I can actually modify the kind of information I'm displaying. So let's go back to our IDE and scroll down to the part where we're rendering this. And inside that A tag, let's put a BR after this. So we go to the next line inside the A tag, and now we'll say small, class name equals, and I'll make it not so dark, say text-muted. And inside of that, I'll put, in parentheses, the year the movie was released, m.year, and then outside of that a dash, and then the runtime, m.runtime minutes. And I'll just get rid of this closing parentheses and move it over to here. And then after that, I'll put another line break, say BR, and I'll put some of the description. Now I don't want the whole description to be there because it might be long, so instead I'll go m.description .slice from position 0 to a maximum of 100, and then I'll put outside of the closing brackets ... So let's go back and have a look at it now. And there it is. Now that's not bad. So there is a very simple way that we can use GraphQL to get the entire list of movies and display it. But of course we can do much more than that. We can get an individual movie, which is straightforward. And we can also, and this is what we'll do in the next lecture, maybe add a search field at the top that allows us to filter the lists of movies based upon the characters that appear in the title. So we'll take care of that in the next lesson.